The scorching sun beat down mercilessly as Zara Aldridge staggered across the endless prairie, her cracked lips and parched throat a testament to 3 days without water. Her once fine traveling dress hung in tatters around her slim frame, and the fancy leather boots she'd purchased in St. Louis were scuffed beyond recognition. The stagecoach robbery had taken everything, her belongings, her traveling companions, and now, it seemed, her life. The summer of 1878 had been unusually brutal in the New Mexico territory. Locals called it the worst drought in 20 years, but such knowledge offered little comfort as Zara's vision blurred and the golden grassland tilted beneath her feet. Her knees buckled, and she fell face first into the coarse prairie grass, the scent of sun-baked earth filling her nostrils as consciousness slipped away. She never heard the approaching hoofbeats or felt the strong arms that lifted her from the ground. Preston Barrett had been tracking a stray calf when he spotted what looked like a bundle of rags in the distance. Curiosity drew him closer, and shock jolted through him when he realized it was a woman. He dismounted quickly, his boots landing with a soft thud in the dry grass. "Madam," he called, approaching cautiously. When she didn't respond, he knelt beside her and gently turned her over. Her face was flushed an angry red from sun exposure, her lips cracked and bleeding. Preston quickly uncapped his canteen and dribbled a small amount of water between her lips, careful not to give her too much at once. "Easy now," he murmured, though she remained unconscious. "You're gonna be all right." He scooped her up and settled her across his saddle before mounting behind her. One arm secured her against his chest while the other held the reins. His ranch was still a good hour's ride away, but Chisholm Ranch had the nearest doctor for 20 miles. Zara drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of strong arms around her and the rhythmic motion of a horse beneath her. Cool water occasionally touched her lips, but she couldn't summon the strength to fully wake. Instead, she surrendered to the darkness, too exhausted to fight. Preston rode hard, the woman's condition concerning him more with each passing minute. When the familiar sight of Chisholm Ranch appeared on the horizon, relief washed over him. The sprawling ranch house, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings marked the heart of the small community that had grown around his family's cattle operation. His father had started with just 100 acres 20 years ago, but Preston and his brothers had expanded it to one of the largest operations in the territory. "Doc Miller," Preston called as he rode into the yard. "Got an emergency." The ranch hands who'd been lounging near the bunkhouse quickly sprang into action. His foreman, Tom Jenkins, rushed forward to help lift the unconscious woman from the horse. "What happened, boss?" Tom asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "Found her collapsed out on the eastern prairie. Looks like dehydration, maybe heatstroke too." Doc Miller emerged from the main house where he'd been having lunch with Preston's mother. The gray-haired physician took one look at the woman and gestured toward the house. "Bring her inside, quickly. Martha." He called to Preston's mother, who appeared in the doorway. "Prepare the guest room and fetch clean linens. This young lady is in a bad way." Preston carried Zara into the cool interior of the ranch house, following his mother upstairs to the guest bedroom. He laid her gently on the bed as Doc Miller began his examination. "How long has she been like this?" the doctor asked. "Don't know. Found her maybe an hour ago, completely unconscious." "She's severely dehydrated," Doc Miller said, lifting one of her eyelids. "Martha, we'll need cool cloths and water. Preston, you did right bringing her straight here." Preston nodded, his eyes fixed on the woman's face. Despite the sunburn and chapped lips, he could tell she was young, perhaps mid-20s, and beautiful. Her hair, though tangled with dust and prairie grass, was a rich auburn color that caught the sunlight streaming through the window. He wondered who she was and how she'd ended up alone in such desperate circumstances. "I'll sit with her," his mother volunteered. "You go on about your business, Preston. I'll send word if there's any change." Preston hesitated, strangely reluctant to leave. "Let me know the moment she wakes up." For the next several hours, Preston found himself unable to focus on ranch work. He checked in repeatedly, only to find the mysterious woman still unconscious as Doc Miller, and his mother worked to cool her body and get small amounts of water into her system. As evening fell, Preston sat in a chair beside her bed, having relieved his mother for the night watch. Doc Miller had gone home with instructions to continue the cool compresses and attempt to give her water whenever possible. In the quiet room, lit only by a single oil lamp, Preston studied her face. Her breathing had steadied, and some of the angry redness had faded from her complexion. Who was she? Where had she come from? And what in God's name was she doing alone on the prairie without water? Just past midnight, as Preston dozed in the chair, a small sound drew him instantly awake. The woman's eyelids fluttered and then opened fully, revealing eyes the color of polished amber. She stared at him in confusion, attempting to sit up before falling back with a groan. "Easy," Preston said softly, reaching for the water glass on the bedside table. "You're safe now. Here, drink a little." He supported her head as she took several small sips. When she'd had enough, he gently lowered her head back to the pillow. "Where am I?" Her voice was raspy, barely above a whisper. "Chisholm Ranch, New Mexico Territory. I found you collapsed on the prairie about 10 miles east of here. I'm Preston Barrett." She swallowed painfully. "Zara Aldridge." Her eyes darted around the unfamiliar room. "How long have I been here?" "Just since this afternoon." "Doc says you're suffering from dehydration and heat exposure. You're lucky to be alive, Miss Aldridge." Tears welled in her eyes. "The stagecoach. We were attacked 3 days ago." Preston leaned forward. "Bandits," she nodded weakly. 4 men. They took everything, killed the driver and guard, the other passengers." Her voice broke. "You don't have to talk about it now. Rest," Preston said, his jaw tightening at the thought of what she must have endured. "You're safe here." "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes already drifting closed again. "Thank you for finding me." Preston sat back in his chair, anger building inside him. Stagecoach robberies weren't uncommon, but the viciousness of leaving passengers to die in the desert spoke of a particular cruelty. The sheriff would need to hear about this, but that could wait until morning. For now, Preston was just grateful he'd found her in time. There was something about Zara Aldridge that stirred him in a way he couldn't quite define, a vulnerability combined with an evident strength that had kept her alive against impossible odds. When morning came, Preston woke to find his mother had already taken over the watch. Zara was awake, propped up against pillows and sipping broth from a mug held in trembling hands. "Good morning," he said from the doorway. Zara looked up and a faint smile touched her lips. "Mr. Barrett, your mother was just telling me how you found me." "Preston, please." He entered the room, relieved to see more color in her face. The angry sunburn had faded to a pink glow across her cheekbones. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle," she admitted, "but alive thanks to you." Martha Barrett, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, patted Zara's hand. "Preston's always bringing home strays, though you're the first human one." "Mother," Preston protested, feeling heat rise to his face. Zara's soft laugh quickly turned into a cough, and Martha helped her sip more water. "I've sent for Doc Miller," Martha said. "He'll want to check on you this morning." She stood, smoothing her apron. "I'll leave you two to talk while I prepare breakfast." When his mother had gone, Preston took the chair beside the bed. "If you're feeling up to it, I'd like to hear what happened." "The sheriff should be notified about the robbery," Zara nodded, setting aside the empty mug. "I was traveling from St. Louis to Santa Fe. My uncle lives there. He's my only family now. The stagecoach had 5 passengers total." A shadow crossed her face. "We were a day out from Santa Fe when they attacked. 4 men with bandanas covering their faces. Did you recognize any of them?" "Their voices, maybe," she shook her head. "They were strangers to me. They shot the driver and guard without warning, then ordered us out of the coach. They took everything: money, jewelry, luggage, even our water," her voice faltered. "When one of the other passengers, an older gentleman, protested, they shot him too, just like that." Preston's hand tightened on the arm of the chair. "And the others, 2 women and another man. The women were sisters traveling to join their brother in Santa Fe. The man was a businessman of some sort." Zara's eyes filled with tears. "They forced us to walk away from the road, deeper into the wilderness. Then they—" She paused, visibly struggling with the memory. "They selected the younger sister to take with them. When her sister protested, they shot her too." "My God," Preston whispered. "The businessman and I managed to escape during the night. We tried to head toward Santa Fe, but without water or food." She gestured helplessly. "He collapsed on the 2nd day. I couldn't carry him, couldn't help him. I just kept walking, hoping to find help or water." Preston reached out impulsively and took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warm room. "You showed remarkable courage, Miss Aldridge. Zara, please." She looked down at their joined hands. "I don't feel courageous. I feel like a coward for leaving that poor man behind. You did what you had to do to survive, and now you can help bring those men to justice." She nodded, though the haunted look remained in her eyes. "I would recognize them if I saw them again, even with the bandanas. I'll ride into town later today and speak with Sheriff Wilson. He'll want to hear your account when you're stronger." Doc Miller arrived shortly after, pronouncing Zara much improved, but still in need of rest and careful rehydration. He prescribed at least a week of bed rest before she could consider traveling again. "My uncle will be worried," Zara fretted after the doctor left. "He was expecting me days ago." "I'll send a telegram to Santa Fe," Preston assured her. "What's your uncle's name?" "Howard Aldridge. He owns a general store on the plaza." Preston nodded. "I'll take care of it today. You focus on getting your strength back." Over the next few days, Zara's condition improved steadily. By the 3rd day, she was able to join the family for meals downstairs, though the effort left her exhausted. Preston found himself watching her closely, admiring the determination with which she pushed herself to recover. He learned that she was 26, orphaned at 20 when influenza took both her parents within a week of each other. She'd worked as a schoolteacher in St. Louis until her uncle, her father's brother, had invited her to come west and help with his store. "I've always wanted adventure," she confessed one evening as they sat on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. "Though I must admit, this wasn't quite what I had in mind." Preston smiled. "The West has a way of testing people. Not everyone passes." "And have I passed, do you think?" There was a genuine question in her amber eyes. "With flying colors," he said softly. "Most people wouldn't have survived what you did." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the distant mountains. Preston found himself increasingly drawn to this woman who had quite literally fallen into his life. Her quiet strength, intelligence, and occasional flashes of humor appealed to him in ways he hadn't expected. A week after her arrival, Sheriff Wilson rode out to take Zara's statement about the robbery. The grizzled lawman listened intently, making notes and asking occasional questions about the bandits' appearances and voices. "I believe we're looking at the Harmon gang," he said when she'd finished. They've been causing trouble all over the territory for the past year. Stagecoach robberies are their specialty, but they've never been this vicious before. He tucked his notebook away. I'll telegraph the territorial marshals. They've been building a case against these men for months. Will they find them? Zara asked. The sheriff sighed. Hard to say, Miss Aldridge. The territory's a big place, but we've got descriptions now and they tend to frequent certain towns. It's just a matter of time before they slip up. After the sheriff left, Preston found Zara on the veranda again, her expression troubled. Are you all right? He asked, joining her. I keep thinking about that poor young woman they took, she said quietly. And the others who died. Why am I the only one who survived? Preston covered her hand with his. Sometimes there's no why, Zara. Just be grateful you did. She turned her hand to clasp his, the gesture seeming as natural as breathing. I am grateful, especially for you. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the connection that had been growing stronger with each passing day. Preston felt a surge of protectiveness, mingled with another emotion he wasn't quite ready to name. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of a ranch hand with a telegram for Zara. She opened it with trembling fingers, relief washing over her face as she read. It's from my uncle. He's relieved I'm safe and says he'll come fetch me as soon as possible. Preston felt a surprising pang of disappointment. Of course she would go to her uncle, that had always been her destination. Yet the thought of her leaving Chisholm Ranch left him unexpectedly hollow. That's good news, he said, masking his feelings, though there's no rush. You're welcome to stay until you're fully recovered. Zara smiled, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes. Thank you. I've grown quite fond of Chisholm Ranch. 2 days later, Howard Aldridge arrived in a wagon from Santa Fe. A round-faced man with Zara's same auburn hair, now heavily streaked with gray, he embraced his niece with tears in his eyes. When the stage didn't arrive and word came of the robbery, I feared the worst, he said, holding her at arm's length to examine her. You look thin as a rail, child, Mrs. Barrett has been trying to remedy that, Zara laughed, gesturing to Preston's mother who stood nearby. The Barretts have been incredibly kind to me, Uncle Howard. Howard shook Preston's hand vigorously. I can never repay you for saving my niece's life, young man. You must visit us in Santa Fe sometime. I'd like that, Preston said, his eyes meeting Zara's, a flicker of something regret. Hope passed across her face before she looked away. The Barretts insisted Howard stay the night before the journey back to Santa Fe. At dinner, conversation flowed easily as Howard shared stories of Zara as a child during her summer visits to his home. She was always the adventurous one, he chuckled. Climbing trees, chasing after the neighbor boys, insisting on riding astride instead of side saddle. Uncle, Zara protested, blushing. Well, it's true. Your poor mother was constantly fretting that you'd never make a proper lady. Preston smiled, easily imagining a young Zara with wild hair and scraped knees challenging the world. It matched the spirit he'd glimpsed in her even now. After dinner, while Howard engaged Preston's father in conversation about cattle prices, Preston found Zara standing alone on the veranda, gazing at the star-filled sky. Penny for your thoughts, he said, joining her. She glanced at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I was just thinking how strange life is. 2 weeks ago, I was dying alone on the prairie. Now I'm standing here, looking at the same stars, but everything has changed. Preston leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that their arms nearly touched. Changed how? She was quiet for a long moment. I thought coming west was the adventure I'd been seeking. Now I realized the journey was just the beginning. She turned to face him. You didn't just save my life, Preston. You reminded me why life is worth living." The moonlight silvered her features, making her eyes seem to glow. Preston reached out, touching her cheek gently. "I've been trying to find the right words to ask you to stay." Her eyes widened. "Stay. Not forever if you don't want to, but longer. I've never met anyone like you, Zara. I'd like the chance to know you better." She caught her breath. "We barely know each other. I know you're brave and determined. I know you have a quick mind and a kind heart. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes and don't mind getting your hands dirty helping my mother in the garden." He took her hands in his. "I know enough to want more time." Zara looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "My uncle needs my help with the store. Santa Fe's only a day's ride. I could visit. You could visit here." He squeezed her hands gently. "I'm not asking for promises, Zara, just possibility." A slow smile spread across her face. "Possibility," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." The next morning, as Howard prepared the wagon for the journey to Santa Fe, Preston helped Zara with her few belongings, some clothes Martha had given her to replace what she'd lost. "Are you sure about this?" Preston asked quietly as they stood beside the wagon. Zara nodded. "My uncle needs me, at least for now. But I meant what I said last night. I want to explore this possibility between us." Preston reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, pressing it into her hand. "So you don't forget." Zara opened her palm to find a small silver pendant on a chain, a star with a tiny pearl at its center. "It was my grandmother's," Preston explained. "She always said it would lead her home, no matter how far she wandered." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as she closed her fingers around the pendant. "I'll treasure it." Howard called that it was time to leave. Preston helped Zara into the wagon seat, his hands lingering on her waist longer than necessary. Before he could step away, she leaned down and pressed a soft, quick kiss to his lips. "I'll write to you," she promised. "And I'll come to Santa Fe as soon as the fall roundup is finished," he said, his heart pounding from that brief kiss. As the wagon pulled away, Zara turned to wave, the morning sunlight catching in her auburn hair. Preston watched until they disappeared from view, a mixture of hope and longing filling his chest. The weeks that followed were busy with ranch work, but Preston's thoughts continually drifted to Zara. Her letters arrived regularly, filled with stories of her new life in Santa Fe, learning to run the store, meeting the diverse residents of the territorial capital, and discovering the rich mixture of Spanish, Native, and American cultures that defined the city. She wrote of missing the open sky of the prairie and the quiet evenings on the veranda. Between the lines, Preston read her growing affection for him, mirroring his own deepening feelings for her. When October came and the roundup finished, Preston wasted no time in preparing for his promised visit to Santa Fe. His mother packed a basket of preserved fruits and homemade bread as gifts for the Aldridges, while his father clapped him on the shoulder with knowing eyes. "That girl's special," the elder Barrett said simply. "Don't let her slip away." Preston rode into Santa Fe on a crisp autumn morning, the ancient city spread before him in shades of adobe brown and russet. Founded by the Spanish more than 2 centuries earlier, Santa Fe retained its distinctive character despite the growing American influence. He found Aldridge's general store easily enough, on the northwest corner of the plaza. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and Preston's heart leapt at the sight of Zara behind the counter, her hair neatly pinned up as she tallied accounts in a ledger. She looked up at the sound of the bell, her face transforming with joy when she saw him. "Preston, you're here." She hurried around the counter, hesitating just before reaching him, suddenly conscious of the other customers in the store. Preston had no such reservations. He closed the distance between them and pulled her into an embrace, propriety be damned. "I've missed you," he murmured against her hair. "And I you," she whispered back. Howard emerged from the storeroom, beaming at the sight of them. "Young Barrett, welcome to Santa Fe." He glanced around the store, then at his niece's glowing face. "Zara, why don't you show Preston around the plaza while I mind the store?" "It's a lovely day for a walk." Zara didn't need to be told twice. She quickly untied her apron and grabbed a shawl from a hook near the door. "Are you sure, Uncle?" "Absolutely," Howard chuckled. "Go on now." Outside, the October sunshine bathed the plaza in golden light. Zara slipped her hand into Preston's as naturally as if they'd been courting for years instead of separated for weeks. "You're really here," she said, squeezing his fingers. "I was counting the days." "So was I," Preston admitted. "The ranch seemed awfully quiet without you." They walked the perimeter of the plaza, Zara pointing out landmarks: the Palace of the Governors, the old Spanish mission church, the homes of prominent citizens. They stopped at a small cafe for coffee, sitting close together at a table beneath a striped awning. "How long can you stay?" Zara asked, her amber eyes searching his face as if memorizing it. "A week, maybe 2 if everything's running smoothly back home." Preston took her hand across the table. "How are you finding Santa Fe? Is it everything you hoped?" A complicated expression crossed her face. "It's fascinating and beautiful in its own way. The history here is so rich and the people have been welcoming." She hesitated. "But I find myself missing the openness of the prairie, the endless sky, the quiet." "The veranda at sunset," Preston suggested with a smile. "Yes," she laughed softly. "Especially that." They spent the day exploring the city, talking and laughing like old friends reunited. Preston found himself increasingly certain that what he felt for Zara was more than just attraction or infatuation. By the time they returned to the store in the late afternoon, he'd made a decision. Howard insisted Preston stay for dinner at the small but comfortable apartment above the store. As they finished a meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Preston cleared his throat. "Mr. Aldridge, I'd like your permission to court your niece properly." Howard's bushy eyebrows rose while Zara nearly dropped her spoon in surprise. "Well now," Howard said, looking between them, "that's certainly direct." He studied Preston for a long moment. "You've known each other, what, less than 2 months?" 6 weeks, 2 days, Preston said without hesitation. "But sometimes, sir, you just know." Howard turned to Zara. "And what about you, my dear? Is this what you want?" Zara's cheeks flushed pink, but her voice was steady. "Yes, Uncle." "Very much." The older man leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "I brought Zara west to help with the store, it's true. But more than that, I wanted her to find happiness." He smiled at his niece. "Your father always said you had an adventurous spirit, that Saint." Louis could never contain. "Then you approve?" Preston asked. "I do, young man, but courtship implies distance between you. How do you propose to manage that?" It was a fair question. Preston had been pondering the same problem. "For now, regular visits. I can come to Santa Fe once a month, and perhaps Zara could visit the ranch occasionally." "And in the longer term?" Howard pressed. Preston met Zara's eyes across the table. "That would depend on what Zara wants." The following week passed in a blur of happiness for Preston and Zara. They explored Santa Fe together, rode into the surrounding mountains for picnics, and spent quiet evenings reading by the fire in the Aldridge apartment. With each passing day, their connection deepened. On his last evening in Santa Fe, Preston took Zara to dinner at the finest restaurant in the city. Afterward, they walked arm in arm through the plaza, now illuminated by gas lamps that cast a warm glow over the ancient square. "I don't want you to go tomorrow," Zara admitted as they stood beneath a large cottonwood tree at the plaza's edge. Preston drew her closer. "Come back with me." Zara looked up in surprise. "To the ranch?" Just for a visit, he clarified quickly. A week or two. Mother would love to see you, and it would give us more time together before I have to return to full ranch duties. She bit her lip, considering. Uncle Howard has been training a new clerk. I suppose the store could manage without me for a short while. Preston's heart leapt. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, Zara rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, her lips soft and warm against his. Preston's arms tightened around her waist as he returned the kiss with growing passion, uncaring of their public setting. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zara's eyes were bright with emotion. That's a yes, she whispered. Howard readily agreed to the plan, his eyes twinkling with approval as he helped them pack for the journey the next morning. Take good care of my niece, he told Preston as they shook hands. And don't keep her away too long. Christmas is our busiest season. The ride to Chisholm Ranch took all day, but Preston hardly noticed the hours passing as Zara rode beside him. They talked endlessly, sharing stories from their childhoods, dreams for the future, and occasionally falling into comfortable silences as they admired the vast landscape around them. When they finally crested the last rise, and the ranch came into view, Preston felt a surge of pride and contentment. This land had been in his family for 2 decades, and he loved every acre of it. Seeing it through Zara's eyes made him appreciate it even more. It's beautiful, she said softly. Like coming home. Martha Barrett was overjoyed to see Zara again, embracing her like a long-lost daughter. The house has been too quiet without you, she declared, ushering them inside where a warm meal awaited. Over the following days, Zara integrated seamlessly into ranch life. She helped Martha with household tasks, assisted the cook with bread making, and even tried her hand at horseback riding again, this time under Preston's careful instruction. You're a natural, he told her as they rode side by side across the prairie, the autumn sun warming their backs. Zara laughed, patting her horse's neck. I think Daisy is just exceptionally patient with beginners. No, it's you, Preston insisted. You have a good seat and gentle hands. Most city folks take months to become this comfortable on horseback. The admiration in his eyes made Zara blush. They had been growing closer each day, their courtship progressing with a natural ease that surprised them both. In the evenings, they would sit on the veranda, talking until the stars filled the sky, occasionally stealing kisses when they thought no one was watching. A week into Zara's visit, as they sat by the fireplace after dinner, Preston suddenly stood and offered her his hand. Come with me. I want to show you something. Curious, Zara followed him outside where he had already saddled 2 horses. The full moon illuminated the landscape almost as bright as day. A moonlight ride, she asked, excitement in her voice. Preston helped her mount Daisy. There's a place I want to show you. It's not far. They rode for about 20 minutes, following a small stream until it widened into a pond surrounded by cottonwood trees. In the moonlight, the water gleamed like silver, and the yellow autumn leaves seemed to glow with their own inner light. Oh, Preston, Zara breathed as they dismounted. It's magical. He spread a blanket beneath one of the trees, and they sat side by side, gazing at the moonlit pond. The only sounds were the occasional splash of a fish jumping and the soft rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. I've been coming here since I was a boy, Preston said. Whenever I needed to think or be alone. He took her hand. I've never brought anyone else here before. Zara leaned her head against his shoulder. Thank you for sharing it with me. Preston turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Zara, these past weeks knowing you, being with you have been the happiest of my life. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I know this may seem fast, but when something's right, you just know it. Zara's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small diamond that caught the moonlight. "I love you, Zara Aldridge. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Zara's eyes as she looked from the ring to Preston's hopeful face. "Preston, I—" She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I collapsed on that prairie, I truly thought my life was ending. I never imagined that day would be the beginning of something so beautiful." She touched his face gently. "You didn't just give me water that day. You gave me a reason to live, a future to hope for." Her voice trembled with emotion. "Yes, Preston Barrett, I'll marry you." His face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of happiness. They returned to the ranch house late that night, their news creating a flurry of excitement despite the hour. Martha embraced them both, tears streaming down her face, while Preston's father clapped his son on the back and welcomed Zara to the family. "We must send word to your uncle immediately," Martha declared, "and begin planning the wedding." Over breakfast the next morning, they discussed potential dates and arrangements. Zara was torn between her desire for a quick wedding and her obligation to her uncle's store during the busy Christmas season. "What about early spring?" Preston suggested. "After the worst of winter has passed, but before the spring cattle drive begins. That would give us time to prepare, and your uncle would have the holiday season with the store." Zara nodded, relief in her eyes. "April would be perfect. The wildflowers will be blooming on the prairie by then." Martha was already making lists. "We'll need to prepare the house, of course. The east bedroom would make a lovely sitting room for you, Zara, connected to the main bedroom. And we'll need to expand the garden come spring." Zara glanced at Preston, a question in her eyes. He understood immediately. "Actually, Mother, we've been talking about building our own place." He took Zara's hand. "Nothing grand to start with, but something that's ours. There's that nice rise about a quarter-mile east of here," his father suggested. "Good water nearby and close enough for family dinners but far enough for privacy." The plans were coming together faster than Zara had anticipated, but it felt right. This was her future, a life on the prairie with Preston, building something meaningful together. 2 days later, a telegram arrived from Howard Aldridge, expressing his delight at their engagement and his blessing for an April wedding. He proposed coming to Chisholm Ranch for Christmas, which would allow him to meet the rest of the Barrett family and give him and Zara time to discuss her future with the store. As the date for Zara's return to Santa Fe approached, she found herself increasingly reluctant to leave. The ranch had become home in a way that surprised her. She loved the rhythm of life there, the early mornings with coffee on the veranda, the activity of the ranch hands coming and going, the peaceful evenings by the fire. Most of all, she loved being with Preston. His steady presence, his gentle humor, his unwavering support, all had become essential to her happiness. The night before her departure, they sat on the veranda swing, wrapped in a blanket against the November chill. 4 months until the wedding, Preston said, his arm around her shoulders. "It seems like forever." Zara snuggled closer. "We'll have Christmas together and you promised to visit Santa Fe in January." "I know." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I've just grown used to seeing you every day, waking up knowing you're under the same roof." "After April, we'll have a lifetime of that," she reminded him, touching her engagement ring. The diamond caught the light from the window, sending tiny rainbows dancing. "A lifetime doesn't seem long enough," Preston murmured, turning her face up to his for a tender kiss. The journey back to Santa Fe was quieter than their trip to the ranch had been. Both Preston and Zara were lost in thoughts of the coming months and the life they would build together. When they arrived at the general store, Howard greeted them warmly, his eyes immediately going to the ring on Zara's finger. "It suits you," he said approvingly. "Now come inside and tell me all about these wedding plans." Saying goodbye to Preston the next morning was harder than Zara had expected. They stood outside the store, reluctant to part. "Christmas will be here before you know it," Preston said, trying to sound cheerful. Zara nodded, blinking back tears. "Be careful riding home. Always." He kissed her one last time, then mounted his horse. "I love you, Zara Aldridge, soon to be Zara Barrett." She smiled through her tears. "I love you too." The weeks leading up to Christmas were busy in the store, just as Howard had predicted. Zara threw herself into the work, finding that staying occupied helped ease the ache of missing Preston. His letters arrived regularly, full of updates about the ranch and plans for their future home. Construction would begin in February, with the goal of having it ready by their wedding day. As December progressed, Zara found herself experiencing occasional bouts of nausea and fatigue. She attributed it to the stress of the busy season and perhaps a touch of homesickness for the ranch. When Howard commented on her paleness one morning, she brushed off his concern. "Just tired, Uncle. The store has been so busy." Howard studied her face. "You're working too hard. Take the afternoon off. Go visit that seamstress about your wedding dress." Zara didn't argue. The fresh air would do her good, and she did need to check on the progress of her dress. As she walked through the plaza, she paused, suddenly lightheaded. A passing woman took her arm. "Are you all right, dear? You've gone white as a sheet." "I'm fine," Zara insisted, though her stomach rolled unpleasantly. "Thank you." She made it to the seamstress's shop and sat gratefully on the offered chair. As Madame Reseda pinned the partially completed wedding dress, Zara's suspicion about her condition grew. The timing would be right those precious nights with Preston at the ranch. Later that day, she visited the town's doctor, her suspicions confirmed with a mixture of joy and anxiety. She would be a mother by late summer. That evening, she wrote to Preston, her hand trembling slightly as she penned the words that would change their lives forever. She sealed the letter with a kiss, knowing it would reach him days before he was due to arrive for Christmas. Howard took the news of her pregnancy with surprise but quick acceptance. "Well, my dear, it seems the wedding might need to happen sooner rather than later," he said pragmatically. Zara nodded, relieved at his understanding. "Preston will be here in a week. We can discuss it then." "He's a good man," Howard reassured her. "He'll do right by you." "I know," Zara said softly, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "That's never been in question." Preston received Zara's letter while working with the cattle in the south pasture. He recognized her handwriting immediately and tucked the envelope into his shirt pocket until he could read it privately. That evening, alone in his room, he broke the seal and unfolded the paper. His heart raced as he read her news. A baby. Their baby. His first reaction was pure joy, followed quickly by practical considerations. They would need to marry sooner, perhaps in January instead of April. The house would have to be ready earlier, or they would need to stay with his parents until it was completed. Most importantly, he needed to get to Santa Fe as soon as possible. Zara shouldn't be alone with this news, working long hours in the store during the busiest season of the year. The next morning, Preston informed his parents that he would be leaving for Santa Fe immediately instead of waiting until the following week. His mother, seeing his agitation, pulled him aside. "What is it, Preston? Has something happened to Zara?" He hesitated only briefly before sharing the news. Martha's face registered surprise, then softened into a smile. "A grandchild," she said wonderingly. "Well, this changes things, doesn't it? You'll need to marry sooner." "That's what I'm thinking. Maybe January." Martha nodded decisively. "Go to her. Bring her back here for Christmas if her uncle can spare her. We'll arrange everything." 2 days later, Preston rode into Santa Fe, his heart pounding as he approached the general store. The bell jingled as he entered, and Zara looked up from where she was arranging a display of tinned goods. Her face lit with surprise and joy. "Preston, you're early." He crossed the store in 3 strides and gathered her into his arms, uncaring of the customers watching with interest. "I got your letter," he murmured into her hair. She pulled back slightly, searching his face. And I couldn't wait another day to see you." He kissed her forehead. "Where's your uncle? We need to talk." Howard emerged from the storeroom, smiling broadly at the sight of Preston. "Young Barrett, you've arrived ahead of schedule." He glanced around at the curious customers. "Why don't you two go upstairs? I'll manage things down here." In the private apartment, Preston took both of Zara's hands in his. "Are you feeling all right? You're not working too hard." She smiled at his concern. "I'm fine. A little tired, some morning sickness, but the doctor says that's all normal." "You've seen a doctor. Good." He sat beside her on the small sofa. "I've been thinking. We should move the wedding up. January if possible. And I want you to come back to the ranch with me now for Christmas. Mother's already planning for it." "You told your parents?" Zara asked, a hint of anxiety in her voice. "I did. They're thrilled, Zara, truly." He squeezed her hands. "Mother's already knitting baby things." Relief washed over her face. "And the wedding? Can we arrange it so quickly, if we keep it simple? Just family and close friends at the ranch. We can start building our house right after, and in the meantime, we'll stay with my parents." Zara nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'd like that. But Uncle Howard the store will ask him to come too for Christmas. See what he thinks about the wedding plans." Preston touched her cheek gently. "Whatever happens, we're in this together. You and me and our baby." The tenderness in his voice broke the last of Zara's anxiety, and she leaned into his embrace, feeling truly safe for the first time since discovering her pregnancy. Howard readily agreed to the new plans. "The wedding should be at Chisholm Ranch," he declared. "That's to be your home, after all." He arranged for an assistant manager to oversee the store during his absence and closed early to pack for the journey to the ranch. 3 days before Christmas, Preston, Zara, and Howard arrived at Chisholm Ranch to a warm welcome. Martha embraced Zara with tears in her eyes, whispering congratulations and reassurances. Preston's father shook Howard's hand vigorously, the 2 men already discussing plans for the January wedding. The holiday week passed in a blur of preparation and celebration. Martha insisted Zara rest frequently, fussing over her diet and ensuring she didn't overexert herself. The family's excitement about the coming baby turned what could have been an awkward situation into a joyful anticipation of the future. On Christmas Eve, as they sat around the fire after dinner, Preston's father raised his glass. "To family, the one we have and the one we're building." "To family," they echoed, glasses clinking. Later that night, Preston and Zara stood on the veranda, looking out at the star-filled sky. Snow had fallen lightly earlier in the day, dusting the prairie with white that gleamed in the moonlight. "Are you happy?" Preston asked, his arm around her waist. Zara leaned into him. "Happier than I ever thought possible." She placed his hand on her stomach, still flat beneath her dress. "Our child will grow up here under this big sky, running free on the prairie. Just like their mother," Preston smiled. "An adventurer from the start." The January wedding was everything they could have wished for, simple, heartfelt, and surrounded by those they loved. Zara wore a modified version of her original wedding dress, redesigned by Madame Reseda to accommodate her changing figure. Though still early in her pregnancy, there was a new fullness to her face and a special glow about her that had nothing to do with being a bride. They exchanged vows in the ranch house parlor, decorated with evergreen boughs and white ribbons. Howard gave the bride away, his eyes misty as he placed Zara's hand in Preston's. The local minister officiated, his words echoing in the room filled with family, ranch hands, and neighbors from miles around. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, and Preston kissed his bride to the cheers of their assembled guests. The celebration continued well into the evening, with dancing in the cleared dining room and a feast that showcased Martha Barrett's finest cooking. As midnight approached, Preston led his new wife outside to show her a surprise. A small cabin stood not far from the main house, smoke curling from its chimney into the cold January night. "What's this?" Zara asked as they approached. "Our temporary home," Preston explained. "Until our house is built. The men put it together while I was in Santa Fe. It's not much, but it's ours." Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, illuminating the simple but comfortable furnishings: a bed with a colorful quilt, a small table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, and a tiny kitchen area. "It's perfect," Zara breathed, turning in a circle to take it all in. Preston closed the door behind them, shutting out the world. "Welcome home, Mrs. Barrett." The winter months passed in a blur of domestic happiness for the newlyweds. As Zara's pregnancy progressed, her body changing with each passing week, Preston found himself more in love with her than ever. He watched in awe as her stomach rounded, sheltering their growing child. Construction on their permanent home began as soon as the weather permitted. Preston had designed it himself, with Zara's input: a spacious ranch house with a wide veranda that wrapped around 3 sides, large windows to capture the prairie light, and room for their family to grow. By late March, as the first wildflowers began to appear on the prairie, the house's framework was complete. Zara, now visibly pregnant, would visit the construction site daily, imagining their future in each room as it took shape. "This will be the nursery," she said one afternoon, standing in a sun-filled room adjacent to the master bedroom. "The morning light is perfect." Preston wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands cradling her rounded belly. "Our child will wake with the sun, just like a proper rancher." "Or rancher's wife," Zara smiled, leaning back against him. As spring fully arrived, bringing green to the prairie and new calves to the herd, Zara found herself slowing down. Now in her 6th month, she tired more easily and often retreated to the cabin for afternoon rests. Martha visited daily, bringing food and companionship, and offering the wisdom of her own experiences with pregnancy and motherhood. "The baby's kicking so much today," Zara told her mother-in-law one afternoon as they sat on the cabin's small porch. "Like a little horse in there." Martha laughed. Preston was the same way, never still, even before he was born, a sign of a strong child. In May, Howard arrived from Santa Fe for an extended visit, bringing news of the store and a trunk full of baby gifts from Zara's friends in the city. He marveled at the changes in his niece, not just her physical transformation, but the contentment that seemed to radiate from her. "Marriage and impending motherhood suit you, my dear," he told her as they walked slowly around the nearly completed house. "I've never seen you so happy." "I never imagined this life," Zara admitted. "When I left St. Louis, I thought adventure meant excitement and novelty. I never considered that the greatest adventure might be building a life with someone you love." Howard squeezed her hand. "Your parents would be so proud of you, Zara." By early June, their new home was ready for occupancy. The move from the cabin was accomplished with much help from the ranch hands and family. Zara, now in her 8th month and moving with increasing difficulty, directed the placement of furniture and unpacked their growing collection of household items. The house exceeded their expectations, spacious yet cozy, with personal touches that made it uniquely theirs. Preston had built bookshelves for Zara's growing library, and she had embroidered curtains for the nursery. Martha contributed quilts and kitchen essentials, while Howard sent furniture from Santa Fe. "It's perfect," Zara sighed contentedly on their first night in the new house. They sat on the veranda swing, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. "Our own little kingdom," Preston kissed her temple, "and soon to have its newest citizen." As July arrived with blazing heat, Zara's movements became more labored. The baby was due any day, and Dr. Miller visited regularly to check on her condition. Martha had moved temporarily into one of the guest rooms to be on hand when labor began, on a sweltering afternoon. As Zara rested in the bedroom with the windows open to catch any breeze, her water broke. The contractions began shortly after, gradually increasing in intensity as the hours passed. Preston paced anxiously outside the bedroom door as Martha and the doctor attended to Zara. Her occasional cries of pain tore at his heart, making him feel helpless in a way he'd never experienced before. "This is normal," Howard reassured him, having arrived from the main house at the news labor had begun. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "I know," Preston said, running a hand through his hair. "I just hate that she's suffering." The labor continued through the night and into the next morning. As the sun rose on a new day, a different cry filled the house, the lusty wail of a newborn baby taking its first breath. Dr. Miller opened the bedroom door, his tired face breaking into a smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Barrett. You have a healthy son." Preston stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion, then rushed past the doctor into the bedroom. Zara lay propped against pillows, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion but radiant with joy. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a tiny red-faced infant. "Preston," she whispered, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "Come meet your son." He approached the bed on unsteady legs, sinking down beside her. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a determined little face that already reminded Preston of his wife. "He's perfect," Preston said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." Martha quietly left the room, giving the new family their private moment. Preston carefully gathered his son into his arms, marveling at how small and yet complete he was. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a button nose, and a strong set of lungs as he protested the transfer. "What shall we name him?" Preston asked, returning the baby to Zara's arms. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to meet their child first. Zara studied the tiny face, then looked up at Preston with certainty. Samuel Howard Barrett," she smiled. "Sam for short." Preston nodded, liking the solid, traditional name. "Samuel it is." The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment as they learned to care for their newborn son. Nights were broken by Sam's hungry cries, days measured in feedings and diaper changes. Despite the exhaustion, Preston and Zara found themselves falling more deeply in love with their child and each other with each passing day. Howard stayed on at the ranch, reluctant to leave his grandnephew. He had hired a permanent manager for the store in Santa Fe, freeing him to spend more time with his newfound family. "I'm thinking of selling the store," he confessed to Zara one afternoon as they sat in the nursery, Sam sleeping peacefully in his cradle. "Maybe build a small house here on the ranch if your husband wouldn't mind an old man nearby." Zara's face lit with pleasure. "We'd love that, Uncle Howard, wouldn't we, Sam?" she whispered to the sleeping baby. "Having your great-uncle close by to spoil you rotten." As summer turned to fall, life settled into a new rhythm for the Barrett family. Sam grew quickly, his personality emerging stubborn like his mother, observant like his father. Preston returned to his ranching duties, though he found excuses to come back to the house throughout the day, unable to stay away from his wife and son for long. Zara adapted to motherhood with the same determination she'd shown in surviving her Prairie ordeal the year before. Though tired, she thrived in her new role, finding joy in Sam's first smile, his growing awareness of the world around him, the way his tiny hand would grasp her finger. In October, as the aspens turned golden on the distant mountains, they celebrated Sam's 3-month birthday and the anniversary of Zara's arrival at Chisholm Ranch. After putting the baby down for the night, Preston led Zara out to the veranda, where he'd set up a small table with wine and dessert. "1 year ago today, I found a half-dead woman on the prairie," he said, raising his glass to her. "Best thing that ever happened to me," Zara laughed, clinking her glass against his. "Not very romantic, Mr. Barrett." "On the contrary, Mrs. Barrett." He took her hand, his expression growing serious. "That day changed everything. If I hadn't decided to check on that stray calf, if I'd taken a different route home." "But you didn't," Zara said softly. "You found me, you saved me." "We saved each other," Preston corrected. "I was just existing before you came into my life. Going through the motions, doing what was expected. You gave me purpose, Zara. A reason to build something more than just a ranch." Tears glistened in her eyes as she leaned across the table to kiss him. "I love you, Preston Barrett." "And I love you, Zara Barrett. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." As they sat together in the gathering darkness, the prairie stretching endlessly around them under a canopy of stars, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the terror of the stagecoach robbery to the despair of collapsing alone on the prairie, to the joy of this moment, a husband who adored her, a healthy son sleeping peacefully inside, and a future bright with promise. She had come west seeking adventure and found something far more valuable: a home, a family, and a love that had quite literally saved her life. The cowboy who had given her water that fateful day had indeed given her so much more: a reason to live, to hope, to believe in second chances and new beginnings. As if reading her thoughts, Preston squeezed her hand. "Happy anniversary, my love." "The first of many," Zara replied, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for the life they had built, and the years that stretched before them, years they would fill with love, laughter, and the endless possibilities of their life together on the prairie.